Welcome to The Big Break Show, a podcast where we discuss short-term rentals, entrepreneurship, life, mindset, and everything in between. Here are your hosts, Rafa and Jesse Vasquez.
What's up, everybody? We're back with another episode at the Big 50. Jesse, what's up, dude? Tell everybody how excited you are.
You guys, we have episode number 50. We've actually made it through 50 episodes. When the average podcast, you guys, just FYI, anybody that starts one only lasts up until 10. So we already beat that. What is that, Rafa? Most people in an average. Oh, you got the whistle.
Is that it? Really? It's 50? That's what they last?
No, 10. So most people that start a podcast only do about 10 episodes and they quit. So Crazy. Here we are. We've already 5x what the average person typically does in a podcast. And we're excited because if you guys didn't listen to it, then we wouldn't be here. And speaking of that, please like and subscribe to this because we obviously need you guys to do that for us to continue to make these, but also so other people will like and want to find out about us and hear about us and all that other good stuff. So shout out to everybody that's listening. Shout out to Zeona Mcintyre, who is our guest today, number 50. And she is in the medium-term rental space, has wrote a book called 30-Day Stays. And she also has a bunch of midterm rentals, has short-term rentals, and has kind of done it all. She's a frequent traveler, and she's able to travel because she's got this portfolio of properties that are serving her. So she gets to live the life that she wants by traveling all over, right, Rafa?
Yeah, it's kind of exciting. I love listening stories like this from people because she started with short term and then she transitioned to midterm. She's got a couple long term in there, but she's crushing. You know, she's got that book on Bigger Pockets. I'm really excited. It was a really fun conversation. I actually had a really good time, and it was a really good one. I picked up a lot about. I mean, you convinced me. I'm going to do some midterm rentals. You know what I mean? So, yeah,
finally,
I think people are going to enjoy this one. This is a good one.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely check this out, you guys. Follow her on social, and yeah, I'm excited about this one too, Rafa.
Hopefully, you guys enjoy it. Leave us a like if you want. We love
the Big 50. Thanks, y'all.
The Big 50.
What's up, everybody? We have a special guest today for episode number 50, Zeona Mcintyre. Welcome to the Big Break Show.
Thank you. I love that I'm 50, you know? It's like those
You're a milestone.
Special shows.
You made it to the milestone. Right. Can't believe we're at 50 episodes. Nuts.
I know. It's freaking crazy. I feel like Rafa, you and I just started this yesterday, and here we are 50 episodes later, and we got Zeona, who just wrote a freaking book, by the way. Zeona, you want to talk about your book? And then we'll talk about you.
Sure. Yeah. So it's called 30-Day Stay, The Real Estate Investor's Guide to Mastering the Medium-Term Rental, which you might know a little something about, both of y'all. So what's really fun about the book is that I found Jesse. He left a comment on something I posted on YouTube. And then I was like, wait, who is this guy? He does contracts. So I went down the rabbit hole on YouTube and watched all of Jesse's content in one night. And then I reached out to him and I was like, yo, would you write a bonus chapter for our book? And so we put it together really last minute, but you are a part of the book officially. So that's very exciting.
That's awesome.
I know. See what the magic of a comment does? And Ziona, it wasn't even on your specific site. It was on Bigger Pockets.
It's true. It was some content I did on Bigger Pockets. So I read all the comments, guys. Get out there, leave comments.
Yes, they are, because you're one comment away from changing your life. So Ziona, we gotta change my life now. That's on you, right? You got that stress.
Hey, I'm working on it. You just need to say yes, Jesse. Say yes to the change, and it's gonna happen.
Yes to the change. I'm excited.
Jesse's hard of change. He takes it very difficult when things are starting to change for him.
Yeah, you know what? Do you want to do a therapy session about me today? It's about Zeona, all right, Rafa? So Zeona, tell us a little bit about yourself. I know that you're in the midterm space. You have a really cool life. You and Rafa have a very similar travel the world life. I want to dive into that here in a minute, but talk to me about you real quick. Who is Zeona? Where were you born? Let's break into the beginnings of your life and to where you are today.
Well, I started as a traveler. I was born in Jamaica, and we moved to Hawaii when I was 2.5. And then I grew up in Hawaii. But because my mom's family was from Puerto Rico, we ended up going back and forth a lot. And so I just got used to traveling. And when I was in middle school, I took a trip to Europe with a school trip. And it just kind of opened the world for me. And so, yes, I have traveled now to 48 countries, and it's a big part of my life. Yeah. So I've done really cool stuff like Semester at Sea. I don't know if any of you guys know what that is, but that's when you live on a boat for a semester. So that was my study abroad experience, going around the world on a ship.
Wow. So
That's
you're like
really
a
cool. I've
sailor.
never heard of that.
Yeah.
Where'd you go? Like Alaska? Like where'd you go?
We started in Puerto Rico and we went all the way around the world to San Diego at the end. But we went, to Africa and Asia and everywhere. Brazil. We went all around. It was really cool.
So it's safe to say you don't get like seasickness then in a boat.
Yeah, it's interesting. You can actually train yourself against it. So at first, yes, but if you're going to try to like read textbooks, you got to figure it out.
That's funny. So awesome. So you kind of had that, like, do you have like super hippie parents then? Because like you're traveling all over the place. Super cool. Those are my kind of people right there.
Come on.
I know. Right. I heard they're giving you the name ZMAC. Is that true? I heard your Bigger Pockets episode, and I think
yeah, I don't think that one's gonna stick, but he could try.
I like Ziona better.
Yeah.
Zeona is a cool name. It's like it's got that exotic sound to it, and you don't really hear Zeona very much. So congratulations to your parents and you, obviously, for getting that name. So so we're talking a little bit about your childhood, going from Puerto Rico to Hawaii. What is it like growing up in Hawaii? Like, I imagine it would be you just freaking surf all the time and eat fish and say mahalo. Or is that not enough?
I think it depends. My family was poor. And so there's kind of like two sides of Hawaii. I think people see the luxury resort side. And then the reality often is those people that work in the spaces to support that, right? People that work in restaurants and cleaning ladies and all of that. And so my mom was a cleaning lady for a long time. So I kind of grew up going to people's houses and just like watching movies while she was cleaning. So it is really rewarding now to be able to support so many people that are cleaning ladies now, creating those jobs, coming full circle.
Yeah. I remember when I first went to Hawaii, I remember talking to the taxi driver and I was like, oh my God, I'd love to live here. And he's like, I work 3 jobs. This is like in the taxi. This is in 2000 when I went for the first time. And I went to Maui and I remember him telling me specifically like, hey, I work 3 jobs. Like I do this during the day. Then I work at a hotel at night, and then I do like side jobs for like fixing things. And he's like, this is what you have to do to live here on these islands on Maui. And I was like, wow, that's a lot of work. Like the dude works like 24 hours a day, doesn't even have time to enjoy the the beautiful area over there. But
it's an expensive city, man. It's an expensive island, not a city. It's an expensive island for sure. So Ziona, tell us a little bit about what happens after you started traveling. I want to know your entire journey of like your backstory, how you got into investing, all that fun stuff.
Yeah. So investing would be something fast forward. But I think like what I got out of my childhood is just realizing that my parents were doing something wrong, that not everybody was suffering. And I knew I wanted to figure it out. I wanted to figure out the financial piece. And so it started around college where I started like reading Susie Orman books. And even though I don't follow her theories now, it really put me on this path of like, how can I get out of student loan debt? How can I be more financially independent? So obviously real estate is a fast track to that. So that kind of got me into that space. But my entry to real estate was Airbnb back in 2012. So I've been doing this for a while now, and I've shifted through a lot of different seasons and a lot of strategies. And now I'm really into the medium term space, but it came from the short term rental space. So Rafa, I can relate to your love for that.
I still love it. Jesse keeps trying to get me to do midterm rentals, but it's so easy for me to do short-term rentals. I don't know if I'll transition at some point, I think, just to make things a little bit easier. But,
hang on that. This guy's in a city that's almost regulated. Like he's got to know that this is going to happen. And for everybody listening right now, if you're not positioning yourself in a space that especially if you're going through ordinances, Rafa's going to be like, I know this guy's on the city and the guy has clout and blah, blah, blah. I've heard that before, Rafa.
We already went through it. We won.
Oh, you guys did? Okay, well then fine for Santa Ana. But everybody else out there, if there's an ordinance or there's not, like you got to position yourself to be able to exit whatever reason. Because you can be shit out of luck once the city or whatever you're at decides to cancel, then what are you going to do now? Right, Ziona?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And that has happened to me over the years where it was like there was just nothing. And then I was doing short-term rentals. And then over time, they say like, hey, you're not supposed to be doing that. And so I pivoted to medium term a while back with a couple of properties, but didn't know what I was doing and didn't know how to do it intentionally. So, here learning from Jesse, trying to get better and better at it.
I'll get out of here. You're a pro already. All right, cool. So we're at an investment part right now. Even though I was diving in the childhood part. Okay, so you traveled a lot, you learned a lot from your parents, and I think we all do in these certain ways. Like as you start adulting, you start realizing like, oh shit, my parents didn't do things the right way. And you kind of have to like reparent yourself. I'm one of those kicks of like reparenting myself, and I think a lot of people do that in a lot of ways. So what can you tell us would be like a defining moment for you where you were just like, okay, I can't live this way anymore. Like, I don't want to do what my parents did, or I don't want to live that way. Was there like something in particular that kind of opened your eyes to that point?
I don't know if it was one moment in particular, but there definitely were a lot of times that it was just really uncomfortable. So there were times when my dad was doing really well. He was kind of in multi-level marketing stuff. So he was always in like sales and different kind of like get rich quick schemes. So there'd be times where we're living in like a 1-bedroom apartment with like 3 people. And then it would be a time where we had this like huge house and I didn't understand what was changing. Like, why would it work sometimes, or why wouldn't it work sometimes? And unfortunately, my dad was never a saver. So it's like anytime he made good money, he'd just blow it all. And then we'd be back to square zero again. So definitely had food stamps growing up, like no health insurance, all that kind of stuff. So I just knew I wanted something more stable. And after, like, I'd say 2011 was when I found Mr. Money Mustache. So it's a blog where he talks about financial independence. And he had just retired and he was 30 years old. And so I was like, oh, you can do that? Like, that's an option. And that really made me go, okay, I'm not just going to be like Susie Orman conservative where I'm like saving 10% of my income. I need to do this like 50% of my income supercharge to find a way to get to financial independence quickly. And Airbnb wasn't even a thought at that point, but that's what really tipped me over the edge.
Isn't it kind of crazy how our mind shifts so hard over something that like now is a norm, right? Like you didn't know that you could retire at the age of 30, and now I'm like kids are retiring like at the age of like 26, right? Or like these young YouTubers and stuff like that. It's becoming kind of like the new norm. Like you don't have to work this like 50, 60-year life and then finally say, hey, I retire where I get to kick my feet up and collect Social Security. Like now you can actually put in a little bit of effort, a little bit of grind, do some investing, do some working, make a couple sacrifices and retire super early. At that point, you get to do whatever you want. You get to enjoy the freedom that you want, right? Have the experiences with the time that you get. It's kind of crazy how like the shift changes when you're around that type of like circle. You know what I mean? Like the whole like investment world type of situation.
Yeah, it seems really normal to me now because so many of my friends did kind of retire, quote unquote, in their early 20s. And when I think back to like just people that are graduating from college now, it must be so frustrating. Like if you're doing the old normal path, it must just be so confusing. So yeah, I think it's a tough world out there right now where it's like if you're not in the right circle and you're not doing the alternative life, it's just like staring down 40 years sounds like a death sentence even more now.
Yeah. So as you're a college graduate, I'm assuming, right, Ziona?
Yeah, well, I got an AA, so sort of.
Sort of. I consider that. So would you, if you started again right now, if you were like 18 right now, what would you be doing? Like, what would you change?
If I knew what I know now, I would get into real estate. I would get my real estate license and then just work under somebody who was like a head honcho until I started building my own clientele. And then I would just be investing anything that was active income into passive investments. So either syndications or different kind of rental properties.
I absolutely love that. We talk about this all the time, right, Jesse? The active versus the passive thing. And now my biggest thing is I really just want passive income. Like I'm throwing as much money as I can into as many deals as I can where it's truly passive, where I just get a check. I don't have to deal with anything. I don't have to do any work because that's what actually sets you up, right? Like you do enough of those and you're getting $100,000 checks a month just because.
Yeah, I think it's just hard to find something that's actually truly passive. And then it's hard to separate myself from the addiction of the hustle, right? It's like, I know syndications are probably a good idea and I should just throw my money into this really passive thing, but I love homes. And as a real estate agent too, because I do that as well, I'm looking at homes all the time and it's so addicting not to be like, ooh, I want to buy that one. Now I can buy this one, you know? So I'm the problem.
You know what, to those, Ziona, the thing is you get to choose that now though, right? Like when you get to a point where you're like, okay, now I'm doing pretty well. I have a lot of passive investments. It's no longer you're doing it because you need to do it. You're doing it because you enjoy it. It's something that you're like, yeah, you sure enough, you get to an age where you're like, okay, well, I'm already financially free. I don't have to really go to work. That's technically retiring, but what are you gonna do? Sit there and watch Netflix and play PlayStation all day? You know what I mean? Well, yeah, I mean, I've tried it. It sucks. It probably lasted about a week. So, you get to a point where you have to do something that really drives you, right? Like live that life with purpose type of situation. And if your passion is still selling houses and going around, at least you get to do it because you want to do it now. It's something that you just kind of keeps you on that motion of doing things. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Jesse and I just talked about this actually. It's like, how do you actually stop? I think like it's easy to just keep giving yourself a job. It's like, oh, I'm financially independent. And then you're like, well, I should go out and teach people how to do this. So then you're like building a course and that's a job, or like consulting with people and that's a job. It's like, ooh, wait, you got to kind of step back and decide what path you're really going to be on.
Yeah. It's funny, Rafa, and Ziona, we just had this conversation with Tony Robinson yesterday, and I'm just like, I don't know how to stop like doing stuff. Like, I don't know how to like slow my brain down. I don't know how to like get to that point, but you do that because you like vacation, and Rafa does this too. Like you guys will bust your asses and then they'll just like chill.
We're
for
always working.
Mm-hmm.
You never off. I mean, at least for the last like most of 10 years, I've been managing my own properties. And like it's automated. A lot of it's automated, but you still have to deal with stuff every once in a while. Right. Now I have my assistant doing most of it. So that's pretty much off my plate. But there's just always something. It's like no matter where I am in the world, I'm available.
Yeah.
You know, except for Burning Man. I'm not available there. It's my one true vacation a year.
Hey, you know what? Can we talk about Burning Man for a minute? I'm curious about this.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to go. How is it? Like, what's the experience like? Like, I always thought it was like a perspective where it's like, because I've never known what it was, and a lot of my friends, like growing up, like I've been to raves and stuff like that. But like, how is it? Like, is it fun? Is it enjoyable? Like, is it like a big rave? Is it just like you're burning stuff in the desert? Like, what's the actual experience of it?
Burning stuff in the desert.
Yeah, so it's hard to explain because I think a lot of people want to compare it to a festival, but it's really like living in like an art installation or some kind of like human experiment. Because it is a place where no money is exchanged. So once you get there, everything's on the gifting system. So it's not even bartering. It's actually that everybody brings extra of something and their intention is to give it away. So it's either food or an experience, open bar, whatever. And then you're at a city. So essentially this is a city that wasn't, existing before. It's in a lake bed that half of the year is full of water and then it dries up. But they create a city of like 80,000 people that come out. So people are just thinking about like 20-year-olds on drugs. But honestly, there's, anywhere from like babies to people in their 80s out there. And so anything that you want, you could find. But it's really life-changing. It's such a different experience. I think I'd recommend it to anybody. But I've gone the last 5 years in a row, and I can't imagine myself not going.
So did you take ayahuasca there?
I have taken ayahuasca, but not at Burning Man.
Oh man, I want to do that so bad.
Oh, careful what you ask for. It's hard.
I think I gotta get a shaman, like a real one, not like some like LA fake dude that just shows up. It's like a 20-year-old, like a legit one. Rafa, let's do that. That'll be our next mastermind. It's like everybody takes ayahuasca, and we have like a real shaman there.
Ever since I read the Will Smith book, I told you I wanted to try it. Remember that?
Yeah.
And,
I
was like, I gotta travel to some other country so I can try it. So it's like legit in the jungle. And I was like, I don't know. Now I'm scared about it.
I mean, people train. They come from a lineage. Most everything comes from Peru. So even some people that are in the U.S. are legitimate. You just need to know like the lineage.
I'm going to Peru in February. I'm gonna have to try it.
Yeah, you are.
Careful.
Rafa's like, so Burning Man, like I never really thought of, I've always kind of wanted to go. I didn't realize it was like a little colony that would come together. That's kind of cool. Rafa, maybe we have to do that.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Like, how long does it last?
Oh, well, it depends. If you're just there for the event, it's like 9 days. But people that go to set up the city or tear down the city will be there earlier. You can go like a week earlier, something like that, depending on what your job is.
And is it like you have to buy tickets or you just show up?
You buy a ticket. Yeah. Okay. They're pretty tough to get.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
It's
Rafa's
an
got
all who you
connections.
know thing.
It's got to be somebody you know, right? Yeah. Actually, my buddy goes
Good.
every year, so yeah, I that's why I was wondering about it. But okay, so let's change from Burning Man because we're gonna go down this rabbit hole of ayahuascas in Peru. Hey, but speaking of, I'm going to Puerto Rico in February, so I'm excited about that. And then I am going to Peru with a buddy of mine who has family in Peru, so I might try it. Just side note.
Yeah, I think the thing just to be careful of in Peru is because so many people hear of stuff happening in Peru, there's a lot of like shaman tourism. And so there's a lot of fakes actually in Peru when you could find somebody more legitimate even in LA. So
Okay.
just keep that in mind.
I didn't even know you can do it in LA.
Yeah, dude. Yeah,
Right,
bro.
research coming.
Rafa's like, hang on, I'm gonna figure this out. All right, cool. So, okay, let's get into that. Let's get off of this subject real quick. I like where we're going, but let's keep it. Okay, so 2012. How did you stumble upon Airbnb? Like, where did that come from? Because I didn't even think I heard about it until like 2014. So, how did you even?
Yeah. Yeah. So a friend of mine was living in New York and he got laid off of work and he was like, I'm super burned out. I need to just go travel. And he had heard about this thing called Airbnb. And he was like, I have this super expensive lease and I'm stuck in it. So I'm going to try to this thing and just see if I can like rent out my place. And then he kept telling me, like, oh my God, this is so incredible. You need to do this. And instead of him just going away for a couple of weeks, he kept extending and extending. And I think he was on like unemployment, fun employment, traveling the world for 6 months or something like that. And at the end of a year, he got $50,000 off of his apartment, which nowadays, Rafa's probably like, yeah, I get that in a couple months. But back then, that was like a salary. Like we were, pretty young, just coming out of college, and we're like, that is what people start with, like a tech salary. So it was pretty incredible. I'd never made that much money in my life. And so he had been harassing me about trying it. And I was like, all right, I'm listening now. I'm going to go try this thing. So I tried it just with a spare room. I had a roommate who moved away or moved out. And I was like, well, I'll just get another roommate if this doesn't work. I've already got like all the furniture, sheets and towels. We'll just see how it goes. And it allowed me to live for free, and back then when I look back at my numbers, it wasn't anything impressive, but it was enough to be like, oh, I don't have to work a job. I can just be the cleaning lady here. And it allowed me to like go out and get another property. So I kind of did the arbitrage thing for a little while. I did about 2 years of that until I could afford my first place. And I just kind of scaled from there very slowly, but it's turned into something really great.
Can you talk about a little bit of like what your portfolio looks like?
Yeah. So I have 12 units across 8 properties in 4 states. And so I've got a little bit of an investing ADD. I'm kind of all over the place. But yeah, it's great. Most of them are now medium term. I've got a couple long terms in there too. But some of them are that hybrid model where they short term in the high season. But a lot of places are not legal anymore. So changes.
As far as when you first started doing your first like arbitrage and your short, like how did that play out for you? Like I know you said you started making good money, so you're like, cool, I'm gonna start working doing some of the day-to-day stuff like the cleaning stuff. When I started mine, I started cleaning my own units too because I wanted to learn the entire business. Now I don't touch any of it. But like, how did you transition from going to that one unit to an arbitrage unit to actually saying, hey, I want to buy? And then I also want to touch. Well, let's touch on that part first.
Yeah. Don't ask me 10 questions. I'll forget.
I was going to go on a rant right
now. Okay. So yeah, I started just doing it all myself. And I think it was also that I was reading like Mr. Money Mustache at the time. And he's very like do it yourself. So he was kind of like poo-pooing on the idea of anybody like outsourcing anything. So that actually kept me small for a while. As like, it wasn't until I had to go on a trip and I had to find a cleaning lady that I realized like, oh, I shouldn't be doing this anyway. But at the time, it was good money just to like make an extra $40 in a cleaning fee. So, when I was working before I started doing Airbnb, I was making like $15 an hour. So all of a sudden, this was amazing for me, And so I started with just the spare room. And then I was renting out my room as well. And I started like pet sitting or staying with friends and like doing trades or different things. And I just kind of realized like, man, I need another place to go, because this is renting too much. And so I borrowed $4,000 from my dad, which now would get you nothing. But at the time, that was like first month's rent and deposit. And I scrapped together some furniture out of that. And so I went and got my first real arbitrage place that I did not live in. And so it was kind of like a slow journey. I lived between two places for 2 years. So I started with that first one. I actually got kicked out of that one. And that was a good turning point for me because I was like, ooh, I don't know if I should be doing this. And my dad's like, go out and get another property. So thank God he told me to go do that. My dad's always been a little gray area, but I think what led me to buy, because that was your kind of question, is that at the time, even though it wasn't illegal, I wasn't the owner. And so I knew that my position was like a little shaky, right? It's like at any point, somebody could just come in and say, hey, what are you doing? Like, you can't do that. And so I had just made sure that my leases said that I could sublet. And I just told them, like, oh, I travel for work, so I might be in and out. But some of these properties, I was like barely in, right? So I felt the most secure buying something.
Yeah, we talk about that often because, I don't know if you're aware, but I do like a ton of arbitrage, right? So
Yeah,
50 something
I
units.
am aware.
Okay, cool. So it's funny because that's always like the biggest concern. Like even people that ask me like, hey, like what if they kick you out, or like, isn't it risky because they kick you out? And it is. It's very, very risky if you don't have like the right relationships or the right like terms in place and stuff like that. I got lucky because the people I work with, they hold these things like they're generational. Like they're buying buildings and then they'll hold it from like one family member to the other, and they just want it leased out, right? So I have like long-term leases on them, and I have a really good relationship with the owners. But it's true. The reason I ask is because even for me, it becomes difficult because I know how much money I can get out of like an arbitrage unit for the amount that I'm putting into it to start up. And so
Yeah.
I was trying to kind of I was curious as to trying to get your idea of what made you go, okay, I don't want to arbitrage anymore. I want to buy. Because for a lot of people listening, like they don't have the funds to get started in buying, right? So the entryway could be arbitrage for a very small amount of money, right? 10, 15,000 bucks, which now you have to go a little bit higher to stand out nowadays. But you can go into a very, very low cost of entry and then eventually get to a point where you're like, okay, I'm making enough to start buying. Right.
Yeah.
With you, it seems it was more of like you just wanted to have a secure investment in place. Correct?
Yeah. I think also it's just like back then, people didn't know what Airbnb was, and I didn't really know how to pitch it. So I was just being shady about it. Right.
Yeah.
It's not like you are now going to these people and saying, hey, I'm a professional. I run this company. I work with contracts. Like, I'm legit. I'm not just like, oh, can I put your, home on Airbnb, where somebody would be sketched out by that. So, I was 26. I think I was just trying to like make it work. So that was an insecure time. I definitely was like,
that is the exact definition of an entrepreneur. You got to make it work, right?
Scrappy.
So,
yeah. No, I definitely was, but I was always kind of like living in fear of that one phone call where somebody was going to like out me. And it didn't really happen, but it freaked me out enough to buy.
Yeah. Now that you're buying, what is it that like, did you start buying with single families or do you have multifamily? Like, what do you have right now?
I have a mix of single families. I have one multifamily, but it's actually long-term, and I have a lot of condos. So I live in Boulder, Colorado, which is pretty expensive.
Nice. Yeah.
And so what I started with was just a 1-bedroom condo. And so that's kind of like the argument that I would put out there is that some people can start buying with pretty low down if they're doing like 3% down, and then they just kind of scrappy with furniture. The thing I just did is that I made sure I was out of my apartment a lot. So one thing that I do that is sort of a hack for me now is I do a lot of pet sitting. So that allows me to be out of my place and then I can rent it out on Airbnb. So there are ways to kind of get out of the place but still have equity. I think the thing that really sold me on buying is that when I bought my first place, in a couple of months, it went up $100,000 in equity. And I just don't see any of that potential when you're sitting on arbitrage. I just feel like it's a wasted opportunity. So
yeah, you're 100% correct. The reason, again, is because people always ask this. The reason why arbitrage is good is because you start with very little money, but if you continue to stay in it, you're doing yourself a disservice because you're losing on all this equity. Like even me now, I just no longer am doing arbitrage. Like I get people all the time saying, hey, let's partner. Hey, let's open more. It's like, no, I'm not doing it anymore because now I need to start taking advantage of the appreciation, depreciation, the actual ownership side of things. So it's important for people to understand the difference because if you're using it as a tool to get started and to generate cash flow, do it, right? But don't use it as like, sometimes I see these gurus out here like, oh, I want to have 1,000 of these because I'm just going to, bro, like it's not sustainable. Like, let's be honest. I do it. I'm an expert at it. It's not sustainable. It's going to last you a couple of years and then you're starting over. Take advantage of the cash that comes in. throw it into properties so that you can build that long-term wealth. And then that's sustainable because now you're securing your future for 5, 10, 15, 20 years to come, right?
Yeah, I look at it like wholesaling. It's like wholesaling, arbitrage. A lot of these things are active. Flipping, that's like the active business where you're supposed to take that money and put it into something passive.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's important to really think about the equity side of stuff. And I think when you're starting off, you don't really think of that. Just to give you an example, 2019, I bought a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. I just sold it a month ago and I made 200 grand that I now put into another property. Like literally 200 grand out of me putting 30,000 into something, like turned into 200K after a sale. So it's insane. And although we're in a different time right now, Ziona. So like that's the other argument that is like, should we still be buying right now? And a lot of people are talking like, should we wait? And there's a lot of fear in the market and, it's going to continue to go down. And I look at it this way, and I want to get into your whole, how you got into medium term, but I also want to get your take on this right now, since we're talking about it. With the state of the economy the way it is right now, is Zeona Mcintyre going to continue buying properties? That's what everybody wants to know.
Yeah, I look at it as dollar cost averaging. So if you're somebody who invests in stocks or index funds, it's like you don't just put a lump sum in. You put in some every month, and sometimes you're buying at the high, sometimes you're buying at the low, sometimes you're buying somewhere in the middle. That's the usual. And over time, you're still making money because you're just kind of buying all over the market and things go up over time. It's the same here. It's like we don't really know. Nobody does. And if people are scared now, it's probably a good time to buy. Not like waiting until it's super hot like the last 2 years where things were just going crazy over asking. But I still bought in the last 2 years. Like that's worked out for me as well. But I just think you have to be a little more cautious in those times. But what I will say about equity is like 2020 and 2021, I probably made 500K each year in equity just because it went up so crazy and I had so many properties. So it's like, that is not to be discounted. It's definitely like a valuable tool.
100%. Yeah. Yeah, it really is. And I looked at it this way. Over the last couple of years, like things have been changing. Obviously, we're going into the market's changing, and every state has a different kind of market. I'm in California, and it's. I just asked Rafa before the show, like, what's it looking like in LA? And he's like, it's dropping. Like, prices are dropping. But even now, I think with that like mindset, there's a lot of opportunities to find properties in the next 6 months to a year. Even now, I think that there's deals that are out there, and you can buy a property today on the MLS in cash flow. And I think you as a realtor, and this is I feel like realtors right now that are in this market have such a good opportunity. And I'm probably like the 1% that's saying this, because you, Ziona, can now be an expert in a specific field. And you can say, hey, investors, I now have this opportunity to help you cash flow. A lot of flippers aren't flipping anymore. Here's what I do, and here's how I cash flow. And guess what? All these investors that were doing stuff traditionally are now looking at you and saying, hey, what property is going to work for me? And like literally, this is how you create the best next couple years or this year of being a real estate agent. Like I truly feel that. I'm not a real estate agent, and here I am kind of preaching to the choir in this situation, but I truly feel that there's so much opportunity for realtors that specifically learn how to do these things. Do you agree or disagree?
Yeah, that's something you probably need to get as your real estate license. We'll talk about this offline, but even just for referrals, it's crazy. And in your space, you working with all of your people in your course, like you could definitely get a lot from that. But it is a hard time, actually. I think a lot of people came into being a real estate agent in the last 2 years because it was just like you swung a stick and everybody was buyer. And so you didn't have to try. And I think a lot of people are going to leave now because it's harder. And it's just because the high interest rates are taking away the ability to cash flow for a lot of people. It's taking out the affordability. And the prices are not dropping fast enough. So the way we're doing it, and the kind of secret sauce I'm seeing these days, is getting into creative finance. And so I'm learning a lot about subject to or taking over someone's mortgage payments, because a lot of these deals at the full price, you can have it be a deal if it's 3% interest rate, but it's not a deal if it's an 8% interest rate. So if you can take over someone's low interest rate from when they bought it 2 years ago, then you're golden. And so, yeah, that and seller finance is something that we're trying to get a lot of our clients into.
Seller finance is getting so popular right now. It's nuts. I see it.
Yeah,
everywhere.
well, it's kind of like the only way to make it work. So that's great.
Yeah, and there's a lot more deals seller finance than anybody realized. That everybody realized. Like, there's a ton of them. You just have to like go find them. And they're actually free to find on the MLS that are like sitting for more than 30, 40, 60 days. Like literally everybody right now can go on Zillow and just search criteria 60 days. If 10% of those listings are potential, like there you go. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of opportunity. So, okay. So I want to dive into this section now. So you're Airbnb or short-term renting. And then where did that, first off, where did the word medium term go from? Like I've always said midterm and then you said medium term. Like where did that come from before I dive into this whole thing?
Short, medium, long. I don't understand where this mid comes from.
I don't know. I like mid so much more. Maybe that's just me.
It's easier to say. I think mid sounds like political, elections or something. But I think what was happening is that last year when I pitched the book to Bigger Pockets, I was just calling it medium. And the midterm thing just started, but it wasn't really out. And so it was very up in the air of like, well, we could call it either. What do we do? And I was like, I like medium. So we went with it. And now mid has come and it's like a little bit bigger and more well known. So now we're just confusing everyone. It's all good.
Yeah.
Sounds the same to me. It just sounds like medium. Mid is short for medium.
Yeah, maybe.
Med term, MED. Yeah, no, I always thought about, I was like, where did medium and med come in? Because like everybody calls it different. And I was like thinking maybe it's like if you're over flyover states, it's considered medium. If you're like on the East or West Coast, it's like mid. So I was trying to I was trying to bring that whole like, all right, cool, East Coast, West Coast. Then you got the flyover states. So you're in Colorado, so you're in the medium space. So there you go, folks. We learned it all here on this episode where medium term came from. All right, cool. So how did you switch from this next like 20 minutes? Let's talk medium, mid. I can't even do it, you guys. I can't even. So let's dive into this. How did that happen, Ziona? Medium term rentals.
It was mostly COVID. So since I had been doing it for a long time, and because of the market that I'm primarily in, like I live in Boulder, Colorado, I was a property manager for a long time. I did a lot of co-hosting, and I did that a lot in my area. I did it all over the US, but I did a lot here. And I saw people coming for longer stays, but I just never connected it. I was just like, yeah, okay, I'm doing short-term rental. And then those are nice when they happen, but I didn't really do it intentionally. And it wasn't until COVID where there was literally like one day where all of my bookings were there and it was great. It was like booking into May and everything was looking good. And then it was like, I think it was like March 8th or March 10th. Literally everything canceled. It was just like day and night. And I had to pivot. I had to be like, okay, well, I own all these properties. I'm not going to just let them be vacant. I got to do something about it. And so luckily I started seeing some longer bookings coming in where it was like, people were quarantining after traveling and there were like emergency workers coming in. And so there were a few people that I started helping in that way. And then I thought, okay, what can I do here? How can I get in these longer stays? And I knew about travel nurses because growing up in Maui, actually, the Maui Memorial Hospital is one of the largest. I think just the demand, like who doesn't want a travel nurse in Maui, right? If you're going to go do it, like don't do it in like Wichita. So I had a friend out there who had a single family home that they made into an unofficial triplex. They like made one unit out of the master suite, one unit out of the garage, and then they live in the other side. And so they'd been renting to nurses forever. And so she just kind of told me like, hey, go on Facebook and join a bunch of travel nurse groups and like figure it out. So I went from there to finding Furnish Finder and everything, but it's worked out really well. And it's really been helpful in some places where now the regulations are coming in. I don't have to be worried about it.
Yeah, I think that's, for me, one of the most important things is the regulations part. But not only that, I think you also were one of the very select amount of people that pivoted their businesses. A lot of people lost a ton of money and lost their businesses during COVID. I remember specifically the date that you just talked about. It was March 19th when everything like boom, like in California, we had a state of emergency. It was like earlier than every other state. It was March 19th. And they came on, the governor at that time came on and was like, hey, we're closing San Francisco down. I remember being in an office in San Francisco and they were like, everything's closed. Nobody's allowed to go anywhere. You can't go anywhere. And I remember I was in this high-rise building working in a corporate job, looking out in the city, and literally like later that night, like everything just was quiet. As I was going home, traffic wasn't crazy. Like people were just like staying. And that was like a pivotal moment for me because I realized like, holy crap, this is, first off, I never would have thought about this. And second off, all my short-term rentals, like, what am I going to do or how am I going to operate these? Luckily, I was already operating as a midterm rental operator. And that was actually my best year I ever had. And it probably might have been one of the best years you ever had with that transition. So I know, Rafa, you were hit pretty hard during COVID and a lot of people were hit pretty hard. But I think, Rafa, you started hosting a lot of business travelers at that point too, right?
Yeah, my entire shift went focusing on small midterm. I'm like midterm because I was doing like 14-day minimums. It wasn't like full medium term. It was like really small medium term, because some people still consider that midterm. I don't.
No, it's
short
not.
term for me. So
definitely not.
It was 14 days for me, 7 days, 21 days, things like that. And it became like the norm for me. I started focusing a lot of my units around 1 bedrooms because of that, because I could always pivot to that if I needed to. Now I get a mixture of everything, but for the most part, yeah, it's always the 1 bedrooms.
Yeah, I think the thing that was the most like confusing at first was just that I have a lot of places that are out of state. And doing short-term rental was great because people don't need to tour, they're not like, it's not like when you think long-term where you're going like, oh man, I have to like walk somebody through the house and they have to like it. And it's this whole thing. So it was great to realize that like, actually there's so many nurses coming from out of town. Nobody's going to need a tour. You can still do basically all of the automations that you've got in the short-term rental space. Most of them apply. So it was an easy transition, but it definitely took a little creative thinking. And there's that part of me, the entrepreneurial part, that's not just going to let it die. I think that was sort of the difference.
Yeah, I hear you on that. Okay, so COVID hit you, and did you switch all your properties to midterm, or was it just like were you full on like I'm gonna just do medium term? Sorry, I keep saying mid. Were you full on just medium term at that point? I know. I got to say medium with you on here.
A lot of the places I was like doing that hybrid, right? It's like I was really looking for those longer stays just to fill it in, because for a while there, it was just like, what's it going to be? Or am I going to have like one weekend and then nothing for a long time? I was like, man, let's just fill these gaps for a while and then reassess in 3 months. And so that's why the nurses were so great. And if I had a gap in between, I would do a little short term just to get the 1 or 2 nights filled, right? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of where it came from for me. But then I started to realize, wow, I actually like this better. I liked the quality of tenant that I was getting. I liked how they took care of the home. I liked like how easy it was, because I wouldn't hear from them after like 2 days. Once they were checked in, if I didn't hear from them at all, I wasn't going to hear from them. So it was just a different thing. And of course, I had to fumble through figuring out leases and collecting deposits and rent and all that stuff. I figured it out now, but it's just getting easier and easier. And I think the automations are coming. When I started in the short-term space, there was no services or softwares. Now there's a million things you can pay for. So I think we're just a little bit early still.
What are the automations that you think are going to come for the midterm rental space?
I think something like an Airbnb is going to have leases, and I think it's going to be automated where it's literally like they click from the screen, they put in their name, it populates it into the lease that you have that's in there, then they e-sign it. Like it's just goes step to step. And before I was having to like DocuSign and send it to them and all this stuff. And it's like now they could just probably, even in something like a Vail or apartments.com, you could get to a place where they just like upload their ID, their government ID, and then it matches the lease and, stuff like that just makes it a little bit easier. Right now, we don't really have pricing software. So I still use I use Beyond Pricing, and that helps when I'm booking on Airbnb because I want to have something that's fluctuating with the seasons. But we need that. We need something that's looking with the medium term rental in mind. And it's just, that stuff's not there yet.
Price Lab started doing a hybrid now. We're starting to do midterm rental pricing.
Great.
Yeah, so you get to select if you want to focus on midterm rentals, and it pulls the data of all the midterm rental bookings in the area. The problem is there isn't enough data for it to pick up yet, but it's picking it up now where you can set a setting and your unit will become anywhere from 30 days to 60 days to even as little as 14 days, but it'll tell you what the trend is and it'll price out according to that as well. So yeah, you're right. I see them coming as well. I know some people that are doing the midterm rental too, and they'll use Zillow for for doing all their screening and ID check and stuff like that as well. So
Yeah.
I'd be curious to see what actually app comes up that actually starts making it very streamlined, because midterm rentals are super popular right now. So
Yeah.
cool.
And I love Zillow for the real estate agents that are doing medium term. And the reason is because you get a lot of relocation. So you get people that are like, oh, I want to rent a furnished rental while I'm looking for a property. And then if you can scoop them up, then you can also sell them a property. So that's worked out well for me too, is like using Airbnb and Zillow as like a funnel for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what are you doing right now to scale your business in the midterm side? Is there anything in particular you're doing, or you're focusing? I mean, obviously you just wrote a book on this. Is this like your primary focus now? You're leaving the short-term rental side?
I don't know if it's going to fully go away for me. I just think that what I'm seeing with like a potential recession right now is like, I don't want to just be in short-term rentals because people are being a lot more cautious with their money, right? So they're not going to be traveling as much, and they're just kind of like in a weird wait and see holding pattern, and that could last a couple years. And so I like the idea of being in urban markets where there's a lot of tenant pool options, right? So if I'm going to do a short-term rental, I'm going to do it like in a more urban or urban adjacent space, because it feels a little bit safer. I think the kind of travel people are doing is going to be less of flying travel, so less of going to Europe and Mexico and Hawaii, but they're going to either do more drive-to destinations, or they're going to do I only go see my family, which is probably a lot more cities. And so, Rafa's in a bigger city. That's probably going to be totally fine to keep doing short term. But the people that bought in like Gatlinburg and stuff, I just don't know. Like, what is your backup plan? Nobody that lives in Gatlinburg that works at the restaurant and that's a cleaning lady is going to pay $4,000 a month for your high ass mortgage,
Right.
So you don't have a backup plan. That freaks me out.
That's crazy, because those markets got so popular and so saturated after the whole COVID thing, because people were just traveling for that. But that recession's coming, so I'm curious. I am interested to see how it's going to play out. I think it's really going to be like the people that truly have those like unique experiences in that market. That's really going to be like the ones that will always continue to get booked, because there will be travelers, but those travelers are going to want that top experience service type of location as well.
Yeah. I think so. So I like that medium term is just not as competitive. You don't have the boutique hotels in there yet. You might eventually, but the designers and all that stuff is still mom and pop. I'm seeing it get nicer and nicer already, but you can still compete pretty easily.
Yeah, for sure. And you can compete even more by going after contracts and just being that like little percentile that's dealing with the contracts directly. I think that's going to be the key kind of moving in the future of that. So, okay, so right now you're in the midterm space. Like, what's your thoughts on somebody getting into this space right now? Where would you expect them to look? Like, because I get asked this question all the time. Like, where should I buy? Where should I do this? Where should I do that? Like, what's your thoughts on that? You just said urban market. So, if somebody new that's listening to this that wants to get into the midterm space or medium term space, what would you give them as like tidbits to look for?
Yeah, so I look at third tier markets, and the reason is because they're still cheap enough that the cash flow works well, and not all markets do. So we were talking a little earlier about you have a student in Tulsa. Tulsa, I think I've looked at the numbers, and it's like even though it's a cheap town, the rents are not very high. But there are some places like I'm really bullish on Omaha, Nebraska. That's some place we're looking at right now. It's still very affordable, but the rents are also very high. And I think it's because they have like one of the top hospitals for travel nurses is out there, which seems really random, but it is. So I think it's a matter of looking at where there are a lot of travel nurses going, where it's still really affordable, and then what are your goals in your own budget. So yeah, I help people invest all over the US. So I'm having these conversations all the time.
Yeah, totally. So what would be like your top 2 suggestions then if somebody's looking, like if I'm looking in Reno, Nevada, like what would that make that a good market for me to midterm? Is it like the cost for the property? Like how would you determine that if it's a good space to buy?
Yeah. So I usually use a general 15% rule. And so basically I want to look at what it's going to gross. And if that's going to be 15% or more of what it costs, then I'm like, okay, cool. That's going to gross in a year. I'll dive in and look at the numbers a little bit more. But what I'm normally seeing is that even though it's a low cost, it's still a low rent. So you want to find those couple of markets where actually you can rent it for a lot, and bonus points if it's a market where you can do the hybrid model. So Omaha, you can do short, medium, long, they don't care. And there's not a lot of restriction around it. So that's like another thing that I've learned over time is like, I've been pulling out of the St. Louis market because they want to know every time you change tenants, they're going to come measure your lawn. If it's 1 inch too long, you get a citation. Like, I can't deal with that shit as a long-term operator. Yeah. So you got to find the markets that are going to be easy. But I like Omaha a lot. I like Indianapolis. But Forbes released an article recently that talked about the top 5 markets that are still looking to appreciate in the next year. And I'm really bullish on appreciation. So I would definitely say maybe go find that article. But they were all really small areas like Indianapolis and Wichita and, Omaha. It was not any of these big cities because a lot of those are losing value now. But then the last thing I'll say, and this I got from you, Jesse, is that you can't be all over the place. If you want to do medium term and you want to be good at it, you've got to go deep in your market. Pick 1 or 2 and get 10 places there. Get 5, whatever. But you want to be the operator in that space so that people are coming to you and being like, oh yeah, I know this person. They do all of this town. If you're all over the place like I currently am, that doesn't work as well. So I am kind of corralling my new buys. And when I sell, I'm like moving everything to one area.
Yeah, I think that's smart right now for anybody listening to this is if you have places that are short-term rentals that are underperforming right now, sell them now and buy in places that you can go deep and not wide. I think I talked about that with you, Ziona, on the phone. I think a lot of people are looking at the space and they're kind of, I need to find deals here and there. But really, what I've seen over the years is the better that you get. This is why I've been trying to tell Rafa to like, dude, you got to at least allocate a quarter of your units to medium-term rentals because he'll be that service provider specifically for that market. If anybody's going to within a 20-mile radius of where Rafa's at, he's going to get all those clientele. You can go to him and say, hey, I have 20 units here. This is what my agency is doing. Like, this is how we're providing for travel medical professionals. We're working with Santa Ana Hospital. We're working with AMN Healthcare, True Staff. And then we're not even talking about the insurance side of things, which is a totally different play. So, I mean, everybody listening right now, if you are getting in the midterm space, Ziona just nailed it right there. Look in your space and look at what the growth is going to look like for the next couple of years. You don't want to just have one unit. You want to think about being an actual provider. One of the things about the medium term space is that you're not going to have a lot of vacancy. You've got to think about these folks that are staying for 3 months, 6 months at a time, even sometimes longer than that. One of my students just got a booking for a year, you guys. A year, like literally an insurance company is paying for a year at 5x the rent. Like, are you freaking crazy? It's nuts. So imagine this guy's already booked. Like, he doesn't have another property. And that's where you get to the point where you're going to have so much demand, but you only have one property that you're not going to be able to serve that community. And you want to be that one person that agency is always going to go to. And that one company can serve you for years and years and years as an actual business. So I think that's a smart thing that you just mentioned right now. So Rafa, I know you're going to change your mind with your properties.
I do both. I mean, I get midterm rentals all the time. I just had a contract that left for 2 months that paid me $40,000. So, it's not like, I get everything. I don't focus on one because they come to me anyway. You know what I mean? So
here's a challenge that I want to give you, Rafa. Pick 4 of your units and keep your calendar open. Like, don't let anybody book. Like, you have 30 days that are just going to be open for X amount of time. And I'll help you talk to a couple different agencies. And then in 4 months, you can be my, what is that called? Ziona, what was I, what is that called?
Case study.
There you go. Case study.
You can use mine. You want to do mine? You can do mine. Forget Rafa. He doesn't need your help. I want you to 10x ours.
He's been trying to convince me to do this forever. And I'm like, nah, dude, I just had a guy who booked for me it was 109 days or something like that. And he paid me like $67,000. It was crazy. He just extended for a year at $6,800 a month. Right. All right. Listen, Jesse, I'll tell you what. Let's do it. I'll do it. I'll block out 4 units for you.
Oh, not for me. This is for you. This is not for me.
I'm doing it to be your case study. So, because I don't need to block them out, but we're going to do it. Okay. We're going to give it a shot. We'll talk offline after this. 4 units. We'll go over it.
4 units. And now you're going to see what's going to happen. You're going to be like, dude, why was I not doing this for the last since 2015
this is one of those
when we started?
Change my mind moments. Change my mind, Jesse. Right? All right, we're gonna do it.
Well, if Rafa changes his mind, you can come change my mind. I'm into it. I'll give you all my properties, whatever you want to play with.
Oh my god! No, and you know what I love about Ziona? Why she switched her? So Ziona managed like literally hundreds of properties over the last since like for years, and then she gets it. Like when you're a property manager, like you deal with all the shit that comes along with it. There's so much stuff that happens on a regular basis. Even regular operators, there's so much stuff. And once you go medium term, it just everything is so much easier. Like, and I can't explain that to you. It's just easier, right, Ziona? Like the guests are just different.
I agree.
It's the same for me, fam. Jesse gets mad when I tell him that. It's true though, dude. You know what? Actually, so let me give you guys a story really quick before we transition here. I just had a guy who booked for 30 days at one of my small units, and this guy's been a nightmare from day one. He's like 3 days in, and he's just like, oh my God, I still have to deal with this dude for another 26 days. And I'm just like, can I kick him out, please? Like, can we get him out of my place? Dude, complaining about doesn't like the city, doesn't like the road, doesn't like the parking lot, doesn't like how the house looks outside. There's scratches in the dishwasher. I was like, oh my God, dude. Oh my God. Seriously, it's been a nightmare. But anyway, all right. So I want to keep it at the hour here, Ziona. So I want to transition to our segment where, being that this is the big break show, I want to ask you. You got to tell us, do you have a big break, a defining moment where you went from old Ziona to new Ziona, your business transitioned, whatever the case may be? What was your big break? For us, like for me, it was like short-term rentals, right? Arbitrage. For Jesse, it was short-term rentals. It's what helped him quit his job, stuff like that. So what was your big break in life, that if you have one?
Yeah, I feel like the pivot point, my big break, is when I went to an old landlord that's an investor. He owned like 17 properties in this one complex. And I had heard that he'd given somebody a private loan before. So I was at the point where I was like, I want to buy a property. I'm tired of just arbitraging. I want to buy, but I don't think I can qualify for a loan because all my income at the time was short-term rental. And that was not seen as income back then. And so I went to him, practiced in the shower, and I asked him for a loan and he just said yes. It just worked out. So we worked out some really simple terms and I did an interest-only loan with him and bought my first place. And it was just like, I probably would have gotten there if he didn't say yes, but that definitely was a pivot point. Like, okay, now I can own properties, and it just changed everything for me.
Isn't it crazy how we all just need that one proof of concept for us to be like, oh, this is totally doable? That was like your proof of concept, right? You had one and you're like, oh my God, I can totally do this now.
Yeah, I mean, the coolest thing about it was that I had been kind of arbitraging a place for about a year, and it was 5 minutes from the place that I bought. It was the same kind of layout. It was just a 1-bed, 1-bath condo. And this place was like $1,100 a month, and I was making between $1,700 and $4,000 a month. And so I knew the numbers. I did the whole year. I had the whole everything. So when I went to go buy the place, it was $900 a month. And I was like, oh, I got this all day. I already did this a year. I know what it's going to do exactly. So it wasn't scary for me because, like you said, proof of concept. So I like to think of Airbnb sometimes as like training wheels. It like lets you try before you buy, but then you should go buy. Don't just arbitrage.
I mean, if you can get through Airbnb, you're going to be able to get through long-term. No problem. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Long-term, you mean midterm?
Yeah, both.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
All the terms.
The terms in this. Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think if you're going from STR to MTR, like you're freaking golden. You're going from LTR to MTR. I think you're still okay. It's a little more work, but
just stay STR, Jesse. I'll just stay STR.
Dude, you just okay. Hang on a second. I'm gonna get in this real quick.
So
you just
mad when I do that.
I do because
keep going.
Hang on. You just said proof of concept. Yeah, there's proof of concept there. You just said that to Ziona. But dude, you just like literally have proof of concept. You're like, yeah, I've got these bookings and blah, blah. Dude, you got proof of concept too. Like, what are you doing? What the hell's going on here, Ziona? Right? Tell this guy.
I also told you that this guy's a nightmare, But look, listen, I'm not complaining. I told you I love midterm because they're awesome. I mean, dude, I got a guy for a year at $6,700 on a 2-bedroom apartment.
That's awesome.
Like, that's insane. That's a 2-bedroom apartment, not a house. It's a 2-bedroom apartment, $6,700. My cost of that place is like $2,700.
Yeah, there's no way you can't. There's a lot of ways to 2x your income, even in urban markets, with buying a property. So, like, I'll just give you guys an example. Berkeley property, $1 million pickup. It's a 2-unit property. The mortgage is like $6,000 on that place. There's just the 3-2 upstairs is renting for $6,500. So the mortgage is paid. The bottom unit that's a 2-1 is renting for $4,500. So you can buy in spaces that you don't think are going to cash flow, and they freaking will, but you just have to go out and like do the extra energy and extra work. And I think that's where a lot of people get stuck and they're just like, I don't know, I don't want to invest. I can't invest in Berkeley or Oakland or San Francisco or whatnot. But there's so much opportunity. It's just like you have to put in the work to get there. But
I'm not wanting to do the work.
I know. Well, you got freaking billing assistants, Rafa. Come on, man.
All right, we're gonna argue forever here, Ziona. Let's just keep it going. You're just watching us argue now. You're like, all right, can you get?
Ziona's like, is this a show right now, or is this like we're gonna go on Maury Povich next? Is that still a show?
Marriage counseling. It's cool.
I know, Rafa. All right, marriage counseling for me and Rafa. So okay, cool. So we're gonna get off the subject of Rafa not midterming, but also let's talk about an actionable step that somebody could take after listening to this episode. Ziona, break that down for us.
Yeah, I mean, I think the actionable step is starting to learn how to run numbers, because right away you can see if something's a deal or it's not. And so one thing that we really wanted when we wrote our book is that we wanted somebody to like be able to pick up the book that had no properties and go out and buy something immediately after. So I'd say, if you don't know how to run numbers, then go get our book, learn all the little details, and then go out and get a property, because there's so many ways. You can, assume a mortgage. You can figure out creative financing. You can partner with somebody. Like, there's so many ways to just get started, and you need to get your foot in the door.
Yeah, I'm definitely buying the book as soon as we're done here. I want to read it.
Thank you.
Yeah, hopefully my bonus chapter's in there in that one. Ziona, is it going to be in is it like anybody that orders now did they get that? Do you know?
So I don't really know how that's going to work. I think that so they pre-printed like 10,000 copies, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think those first 10,000, if people didn't pre-order, they might not get the bonus. So the first 2,500 people or 2,500, those people did get the bonus chapter. But I don't know what's going to happen to these people in between. So Rafa, we might just send it to you. But maybe they can just reach out, I think like in the next printing, it'll be included, but I'm not sure what happens to the people in between.
Yeah, I hear you. Well,
it's all right. I happen to know the authors, so he could just probably shoot me over the author the chapter.
You got that inside scoop.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to give this guy anything because I've been talking to him about it for freaking years now, and he hasn't.
I just agreed.
It's the most annoying thing. People don't take action when you give them advice.
Dude, Rafa.
Dude, you know what, Ziona? You're right, because Jesse comes to me for advice like on the daily, and then he like doesn't like it won't validate it unless someone else tells him the same thing I just told him. All the time. I'm like, dude, do this. I don't know, bro. And then someone literally says the exact same thing, and then he goes and does it. So yeah,
marriage
Jesse.
Counseling.
It's because I'm like a scientist. I got to see the proof in the pudding. I got to see the data that supports what you're talking about.
You got to pull around and make sure it's not just a one-off. I see what you mean.
Exactly. That's me. That's how I operate.
That's hurtful.
So Ziona, where can folks find you? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so I have a podcast as well. It's called Investify. So if you guys want to check that out, me and Craig Curelop talk about house hacking to getting to financial independence. And then Instagram's probably the easiest place. I follow all my DMs and respond to everybody. So Zeona Mcintyre, just my name.
Awesome. You want to talk about your book? Do you want to talk about where they can find that?
Oh yeah, the book. You can get it at biggerpockets.com/30-day stay. You can use code Ziona, which is my name. You guys have been saying it wrong the whole time.
Wow.
It's okay.
Dang it.
So sorry.
Oh my goodness.
For 10%
my God,
off. I was just like,
embarrassing.
I'm not going to say it, so
You
like
should
it doesn't
totally said
matter, but
something.
then I just
Got
said
started.
it, so it's fine.
I'm so sorry.
You guys are chilling. It's fine. Anyway,
goodness.
well, this was really fun. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we appreciate it.
Coming on. This was great.
Yeah, well, there it is, folks. Miss Zeona Mcintyre. We've been saying her name wrong the entire time. She's an author.
Absolutely.
She was raised in Hawaii, surfed all the time, hippie parents, did ayahuasca, wrote a book, has short-term rentals, midterm rentals. I mean, dude, you're doing it all. I'm stoked to watch you continue to thrive in this space. And yeah, you guys go follow her, check out all of her info, and we appreciate you for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, this was a great conversation. Thank you. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, we did. Arguing, Rafa. Thanks, everybody.